Okay. We're doing we're in Kufyud Dal Aruch Hey, doing part 2 of what we call the Pesach Medicine Lists. Really done Umil Nafshe, with a focus on that. So I'm just going to give a quick chazar just to remind us where we are from last time before we move on to where we are today. Okay, you remember this slide? There are 4 cases that we're going to talk about, that Shulchan Aruch talks about, where you do or don't say Umil Nafshe. The first is Ayawidin, about pomegranate wine, where the Mechaber says we do say Umil Nafshe. It's juice. Yeah, that does it. They ate that kashrus last time. Yeah. Okay. The second case was Hilchos Tzitzis. Can you just close it up, please? Hilchos Tzitzis was the second case, where the din is that if a guy tells you that a talus is made with kosher tzitzis, that you believe him because of Umil Nafshe. Our third case was in Hilchos Beitzim, where we said that if a guy comes and tells you that an egg comes from a certain bird, a kosher bird, in this case that's a turkey egg, he tells you that an egg is from a kosher bird, then you believe him. If he just tells you it's a kosher bird without telling you what it is, then we don't believe him. So again, another Umil Nafshe. And the last case was in Hilchos Shatnez. We did the din is, by and large, we do not believe the guy. If he tells you that a suit is not Shatnez, you don't believe him. If you tell him to make you a suit and use hemp threads instead of using linen threads, you don't believe him there either. The one case where we do believe him, the one case where we believe him is if you hand him the linen threads and you say to him, the hemp threads, the kanapas, okay, the hemp threads, and you tell him to sew the suit with that, then in that case you believe him. If he comes back to you tomorrow with a made suit, you believe him that he used those threads. Okay? And the question we talked about, I'll show you some details in a second, but the place we're going to talk about, how come in some cases we believe him, and particularly in the Shatnez case we generally don't believe him. Even the egg case, it's a machlokes. I told you what the Ramah says, that we believe him. It's a question. Many others don't agree that you believe him. So the question was trying to understand why we believe him in some cases and not other cases. Okay? These are 4 cases in Shulchan Aruch. And we then applied them to 2 of our own cases. Okay, and the first was what the title of the shir was, about Pesach Medicine Lists, which is to say they ask companies for information about medicines, and the company tells them, it has chametz, it doesn't have chametz, or about cosmetics and things like that, and the people, based on what the company says, then they go forward, because they're trusting them, because Umil Nafshe, they say, you're an Uman, you're people in charge of quality issues. If you tell me that it has chametz or doesn't have chametz, then they believe them. And the other case was a case about bagged salad, where there was a reputable hashgacha, which was doing the following. In order to, the hashgacha decided that the machinery was able to clean the lettuce if it came in with less than a certain amount of bugs. So if the number was less than 5 bugs in the head, then they could clean it. If it was too many bugs, it wouldn't clean it. But they let the plant personnel, non-Jews, make that decision if it had too many bugs coming. They weren't there when they made that decision. And then based on that, they would either put the hashgacha on or not. And then the hashgacha would check bags later to see if they were coming out clean. But they were leaving up to the company based on Umil Nafshe, saying they wouldn't lie about whether they came in with 5 bugs or 10 bugs, and therefore, they were trusting the company. So we were trying to apply, once we hear our explanations, when we say Umil Nafshe, when we do or we don't, to apply them to these 2 cases that I said. We're not thinking about buying tzitzis from Goyim or pomegranate wine or whatever, so we're going to apply them to these 2 cases. Okay? So, and that was the case that we said we're not talking about, which we talk about when we get to Halachiyot, which was tuna fish. Okay, we talk about tuna fish, which is also very connected to the Shayla of Umil Nafshe, but it has its own special twist to it. That's going to be for Halachiyot. Okay, so now, last time we did 3 answers, 3 explanations. I'm not going to go through those 3 answers again, but I'm going to show you the green and the orange on this chart over here is to show you that in the greens was the cases where what that Pesach said, what they explained, when we say Umil Nafshe, fit with the dinim that we saw. Okay? So in the greens mean that it fit. It seemed to go well with what the din said, and the orange meant that it wasn't so clear. It wasn't so obvious how that hesber could fit with the way we saw din Shulchan. Okay?
What about other reasons to believe that? Are you discussing that? Or just Umil Nafshe?
No, we're talking about Umil Nafshe.
Okay? There might be other reasons to believe.
Yes, actually, that's a good segue into what I'm about to tell you. Okay? So, but we're focusing on Umil Nafshe. Okay? That's what I mean, it says that we open the din in the Hilchas Beitzim, it talks about you should believe him because we're not sure you shouldn't believe him. Okay? Now,
but those are the cases, the Pesach and the Flores might be other reasons.
right. I'm going to talk at the very end a little bit about that, but not really. Okay? So now, the next answer we have is from Magen Avraham. Okay? Magen Avraham is in Hilchas Tzitzis. Okay? I told you about this case in Hilchas Tzitzis. And he brings there in Aruch the Beis Yosef says, in the way we would have thought about it before we saw our Beis Yosef. If you remember, I didn't put on the screen, the Beis Yosef by us said, you say when it's Ikka Lamikba Love Tfeya. I may not be getting the words exactly right. Okay, when he's very particular. Over there, it's not what the Beis Yosef says. Over there in Aruch the Beis Yosef says is, a guy would never lie, because if a guy in business would lie, nobody will come back to him. No one will ever show up in his store again. Okay, in a very simple, straightforward way. You don't lie in business, because if you lie, your customers will never come back. Okay, it sounds very straightforward. So, which seems what we would have guessed before we listened to me the whole last week. Okay, so the Magen Avraham is a kasha now. He says, if I walk into a store, and someone who's not Jewish tells me this meat is kosher meat, he says, why don't you believe him? If you say a guy won't lie because he's afraid if he lies to you, then you won't come back and shop by him again. So why don't we believe the guy? The guy tells me this is kosher meat. Why don't we believe him? Of course, we're not going to believe him. So why not? If there's such a rule as that people don't lie no matter what, they don't lie in business because if they lie, they'll lose all the customers. So why don't we believe in that case? Okay, so the Magen Avraham says no. So really, it's because you don't. But Beis Yosef should not be taken literally. Okay, Beis Yosef in Aruch says that the reason you see he's afraid no one would lie. He says it's not true. He says that's not what the Beis Yosef means. Beis Yosef means is it's something to do with his umness is on the line. If he's talking about something that relates to his particular skill that he has or his trade that he has, that's the thing that person wouldn't lie about. Okay, this part of the Magen Avraham is very much like the first answer in the Chamsi. Okay, he won't lie when it comes to that. So the guy telling you that it's kosher meat has nothing to do with his umness, as opposed to that person has nothing to do with his umness. As opposed to, he doesn't say this, but as opposed to, he sort of says it in our case by the Yen Rimonim. Okay, his business is he's a pharmacist. Okay, he's giving you medicine. Okay, it's something that's there for medicinal purposes. So if he lies to you or he misleads you about whether this is medicine or it's not medicine, then you won't trust him as a pharmacist. It has to do with his umness. So for that kind of thing, that's where you believe him. But believing him about whether meat is kosher has nothing to do with his umness. Okay? So now the Magen Avraham asks himself. He says, okay, so why the Hilchas Tzitzis do we believe the guy? Okay? Why do we believe him when the Hilchas Tzitzis has nothing to do with his umness? Okay, and people asked last week, well, maybe it's talking about a case that is his umness. I looked at it again, and the Beis Yosef says specifically that the person who's selling the tzitzis is not only selling tzitzis. Okay, it's a clothing store. Okay, and one of the things he has is talisim. Okay, one of the things he has is talisim. It's not his umness to sell tzitzis, his business, his umness to sell clothes. So if he come in and tell you that this is a size 10 and it's really size 12, that's to do with his umness. He's tricking you on what exactly the thing that's his umness. But whether it's kosher tzitzis or not kosher tzitzis is not him. So that's the Magen Avraham kasha. He said it's true that he doesn't want to lie, but I just told you that just lying in business is not enough to say umar nafshi. Okay, so the Magen Avraham says that there's an extra svara here. There's the minimal umar nafshi if a person doesn't lie in business. He says that's usually not enough. But over here there's a tziruf of something else. He says Goyim don't have talisim. Okay, they don't have, so to speak, like access to having talisim. He says it's meduig. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, which is sort of from a Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch says the case is the guy selling a talis. He says he's not selling tzitzis, he's selling talisim. He says if we talk about selling tzitzis, that's just strings. So if I can get a string, big deal, you can find strings. But to have the garment that we call a talis, okay, to have a talis with strings on it is totally not normal for a guy to have that, and therefore that b'tziruf, the fact that there's a minimal umar nafshi is why we should believe him. Okay, so he says it's really the din in Aruch when it says you believe the person about the talis, which has to do with umar nafshi. That's not the whole thing. There's other things going on here why we should believe him. Okay. Okay. So I'm not going to show you that yet. Okay, take it back. Okay. Okay, I will show you that. Okay, so I don't have more to say. The Magen Avraham, aside from what he's answered different about tzitzis, aside from he said that tzitzis is different because of the special svara, is really similar enough to the first Chamsi's answer. So the chart looks the same. The case where we should or shouldn't believe him, I'm not going to go over those details. Okay, that was the Magen Avraham. Taz.
Chart looks the same.
It is, except for the case that the tzitzis from the Magen, except that the tzitzis, the Magen Avraham had a special reason for that. The Torah is the same. When it fits with the din and when it doesn't fit with what the din said, was the same. Okay. Taz says like this. The Taz says an uman who let's do a case of tzitzis. It's easy to explain in that case. He says when the guy is selling a talus, okay, let's say a talus costs $100, okay. So let's say a talus costs $100, okay, and if he's selling a talus without kosher tzitzis on it, it sells for $100, and you sell it with tzitzis, it sells for $110. Okay, it has extra value because it has its tzitzis on it. Okay, so he says so when a person's an uman and he wants to make this thing more desirable, to sell it for a little bit of a better price, he's not willing to risk his whole umnus in order to make this a little extra. To make these things a little bit more desirable, he won't cheat for that. Okay? What he would cheat is if he has lots to gain. Okay? If he has something to sell you that he has that he has lots to gain by doing that, then for that the uman would take a risk. But to risk everything just for this little benefit, which is I could sell the towels a little better or for a little bit more money, he says that the uman is not willing to do. Okay? And the Taz says himself also, and that's why I think the Taz says this. That's why, again, Shulchan Aruch says the case of a talus rather than tzitzis. If he was selling tzitzis, we would not believe him. If he came to you the strings that these were made small, we would not believe him. It's only because he's selling you a talus that basically the talus is just as valuable. With the Mikdash who made the talus. The fact that it has the strings on it gives it like this extra value. For that, the guy wouldn't cheat for that. Okay. Okay. So let's go to our case of shatnez. I give him in shatnez the advantage is not a financial advantage. Okay, in tzitzis you could sell them faster or for more money. In shatnez, the Ramah says the advantage of using linen over hemp is that it's easier to sew with. Okay, but so it works better if you're a tailor. It's easier to work with linen than it is with hemp. That's what the Ramah says. So if I go to the uman, to the tailor, and I say to him, here's a roll of hemp, I want you to sew with this thing. So now he has a choice. He can make me a suit, and he can make it easier for him by using the linen thread that he has anyhow, or he can make it a little more difficult and use the hemp that I handed him. Okay? So for the Taz will say is for that little benefit, the little benefit of making it easier to sew and use what the guy asked for that I'm not willing to give up, to risk my umnus on it. Okay? But in the two cases when the person is not believed, in both of those cases, or at least in the case of a suit that was already made, when I come to him and I say to him, I want to buy this suit. You say, is it shatnez? He says, no, there's no shatnez in it. Okay? There's not a little benefit over here. Okay? The customer is going to walk out the door if the suit is shatnez. He's not going to buy you a suit that's shatnez. So there, the Taz will say, we do not see ulam manafshe. The fact that over there he has lots to gain. The entire sale is hanging on that answer. Okay, so for there, we're not going to say ulam manafshe. Okay, and the same thing by the yen remindum. By the yen remindum, as I can imagine, we're not choshesh that he switched the yen remindum for grape wine. The choshesh that he mixed in some. Okay, I don't think that it's unreasonable. He can hand you grape juice, and you're going to think it's pomegranate juice, or grape wine, you're going to think it's pomegranate wine. Okay, so the point is that you're choshesh that he mixed in some of it into it. Okay, so again, that's an example where the guy's getting a little bit of benefit, getting a little bit of benefit of he could swipe in instead of pomegranate wine goes for $1 a gallon, and this goes for 75 cents. So he can get a little bit by adding it in to dilute 5% of it with grape wine. That we wouldn't be choshesh. Okay, and the same thing by the eggs also. Same thing by the eggs also. That all the eggs. Let's say he has turkey eggs. He has turkey eggs and ostrich eggs. Okay, ostrich eggs are too big. Okay, turkey eggs and I don't know some other birds' eggs that are trace. Okay, some other birds' eggs that are close enough that nobody will know the difference. Okay, they all have value to them. The point is just he could sell for a little bit more if he's giving me a turkey egg or a kosher egg. So in that case also we believe the uman because the uman would be larmar nafshe for that little benefit of selling it for a little bit more. And last for our two cases.
I just want to make sure I understood that.
Go ahead.
So the case of the shatnez, you're saying that the customer would not buy it at all because of shatnez.
Right.
Because it's not wearing.
He's going to lose the entire sale. If I walk in...
And by the egg, if it's not a kosher egg, then what's going to
No, because by the egg, you're saying because I won't buy this specific egg from you.
Right.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong about that. To me, if I'm an eggs person who sells eggs, so then I sell eggs. So if I lose one egg, I don't think that's like a big difference.
Because of the cost of each individual.
Yeah, right.
How do we know that he's only selling one egg? Maybe he's selling a lot of eggs.
100 eggs. So maybe he's selling me 100 eggs, and I'm going to walk out.
They're all turkey eggs.
Right. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to walk out on the deal. Okay. That's fair. Okay. That's a good question. I'm not sure the answer to that. Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not. The Taz doesn't say any of these cases. You see, there's no dots in the Taz. Okay. I'm just piecing together, trying to make a cheshbon for it. Okay. Maybe it's one. It happens to be in the egg case. In the egg case, we're going with what the Ramah said that you should believe the guy. Okay. The Rambam for sure holds you don't believe the person. It's a shiloh whether the Machaber feels like that also. That maybe we should not say Umar Marshay. Okay, it's up in the air what they did. I'm going with what the Rambam says that we do believe a guy who says that. Okay, but it's not clear. So you'll tell me that hazard for the other side. I'm the easy way out on that one. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, now. So this is where our chart holds. In our lettuce and our medicine, again, the guy has very little to gain by telling me something that's not true. Okay, what he has to gain is very little. That some Yidden will buy his medicine over Pesach is, in the big scheme of things, is a very small difference. So the Taz says, when in that kind of a case, when you have a little bit to gain, it makes your thing a little bit more desirable. Okay, then we could say Umar Nafshi, and the person tells us we can believe him. Okay, same by the last. Okay, for our last answer, is Nodah B'yehuda. Okay, Nodah B'yehuda is actually talking about Pesach Shiloh, which was that the people who sold sugar, there was a chashash that they would mix flour into the sugar. Okay, and they would dilute the flour was cheaper, and there was a chashash that people would take sugar and dilute it with flour. So of course, you can't use it on Pesach if there's a chashash that there's sugar, if there's flour in it. So the first half of the tshuva is about whether we should be choshesh that the manufacturer does it. Okay, that's not negate us. Okay, well, there's all kinds of discussions about whether we think the manufacturer does that. But then it comes to the second half of the tshuva is about whether the merchant would do it. The guy selling it in your local neighborhood supermarket, would he mix in the flour? And over there he talks about whether we should say umar or nafshi. Okay?
They do it because it's cheaper?
I'm assuming because it's cheaper. I'm assuming that's right. I don't remember if that's what it is. I'm assuming it's just because it was cheaper. So the first thing he'd start to do is he says he doesn't buy the Magen Avraham. I told the Magen Avraham says that tzitzis is special because Goyim don't have talaisim, they couldn't have a talis with tzitzis on it, they would never have, and that's all. But see if he says it's not true. Okay, he brings a bunch of rayas from the fact that in all kinds of cases, poskim for sure, and even Rishonim compare the case of talis to all kinds of other cases. They bring rayas from it, they bring rayas to it, all kinds of back and forth, as if talis is a plain old-fashioned case of umar lamar nafshi. Not the way the Magen Avraham is saying is that it's a tirf of umar lamar nafshi with something else. Okay, it's a tirf of that together with the fact there's some special rule about talaisim that Goyim won't have talaisim. Okay, so he doesn't buy it. He says he doesn't accept the Magen Avraham. He says like this. He says a goy never has nemanis. Okay, he brings a bunch of rayas. No matter what, even umar lamar nafshi doesn't give him nemanis to say something happened. Okay, all it does is it has nothing to do with believing him. We don't believe him. All it does is for the following case. He says, if the guy would have to actively do something, he'd have to go out of his way to do something to ruin this thing or to make it treif or to whatever he has to do, that's the case when we believe the guy if he's an uman. A regular person who's not Jewish, he might even do that. But the uman wouldn't risk his umness to actively go ahead and do something that would ruin something or to make it not kosher, etc., or something like that. Okay, so he says so by the piece of meat, what you're wanting him to say is that it is or is not kosher. Okay, that's something that he didn't have to do something. He had a piece of meat in his fridge, and you wanted to buy from him. He says, yeah, it's kosher meat. Okay, so it's just a straight nemanis. Is it true or is it not true? Is it yes or no? That we say no, we don't believe. Okay, but if it brings you a talis, in order to have this talis to be not kosher, it means that he went ahead, he made strings that looked like talisim and stuck them onto a talis. Okay, he doesn't have talisim laying around that are not kosher. He would have had to go ahead and done that actively by himself. That an would not kosher, she would do that. Okay, so it's never a case of umnus. Now I have to tell you, he doesn't bring any rayas to this chiluk. Okay, a lot of the other answers we've heard fit more smoothly into what the Beis Yosef said, that it's ikkel mikvah of tfei. He's very makbid about certain things. This has nothing to do with his hakpada. It has to do with would he go out maliciously, like to get you or not, or just tell you the not truth. But that's what he says. Okay. So we're not according to this, not so clear why, by the case of the eggs, we should believe him. Why would the Rama say to believe him? The egg seems to be exactly the same case as the piece of meat. Okay, he has an egg in front of him. He's telling me it comes from this bird and not from that bird. So it's just a matter of honesty. Do we believe him or do we not believe him? Not clear why we should believe in that case. And in the case of shotness, we sort of understand that. Okay? If he comes and tells me that the suit that was already made is not shotness, we don't believe him. That's a question just of the truth. Either he's telling the truth or he's not telling the truth, we don't believe him. If I hand him the hemp and I say to him, please make me a suit with this, that's a case where we should believe him. Because if he didn't make the suit with that means he went out of his way, took the thread that I gave him, and instead switched it for something else. That would not choshesh a guy would do that. Okay? When he's an we're not choshesh like that. It's not clear why, if there's another case in Shulchan Aruch, if I tell him to use the hemp, then why don't we believe in that case also? He would also have to go ahead and go out of his way to use the wrong one. Okay, I'm not sure.
Is he talking about our regular refined sugar?
As far as I know.
It's not much flour you can mix in there without
being noticeable. Okay, so maybe the sugar was finer. Maybe they had like maybe it's confectionery sugar. Maybe it's confectionery sugar. Obviously, it was a real shot. I mean, I can't tell you whether I'm believing him on that. Okay, just like
imagine a little bit you can mix.
Just like I told you, the Rama talks about a test that you could do to tell whether something is shotness or not. Okay, but whether the test works or not is not important to us. We just have to figure that in the feed the way the Rama understood.
Actually, in Beverages, there are a lot of people are more makbid because of that. They say a little grain of wheat.
And they won't use sugar.
They won't use sugar on
oh, yeah. There are plenty of people who do not use sugar on paper. Yeah, because there was a chashash of people doing. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
But how's the medicines, though? Like, isn't there a certain big company isn't going to lie to you about?
So I'm going to talk about some of that in a second, but what we're trying to do is follow the rules. So I'm going to go to the medicine right now. Okay.
All the considerations.
Mm-hmm.
Does that really apply to a big company that has a quality control person when it comes to medicines? If they start lying or fudging about any of the ingredients,
mm-hmm.
they're not going to worry about it.
Okay, so it's a shiloh here, a din shiloh. Okay, so I'll answer for now. I'm going to say more in a second, but for now I'm going to say to you it's a shiloh and din. Should we say umulamar nafshi, not umulamar nafshi? If he doesn't have the manas, he doesn't have the manas. We could come up with our own ideas. If there's a rule, there's a way to believe a person because of what you said. It's called umulamar nafshi. But if he doesn't have the manas, like in this case, let's say in the case of the medicine, the way the Nodah B'yehuda explained it, the B'yehuda says is you only believe if you'd have to actively do something to have cheated. But if you just tell me a piece of information, we don't believe you, even if you're an uman. So that's what the medicine company is. The medicine company, they didn't go ahead and do anything bad. They made the medicine. Now you come back reporting it. They wouldn't have cheated to put in chametz. They'd say, is it chametz or is it not chametz? So now it's just a matter of their manas. And the Nodah B'yehuda says, in that case, we don't believe the guy. Okay? Now, most of the other people thought you should believe him because of an uman. So the Nodah B'yehuda made the rule. He said, uman l'mar nafshi only works to tell us that he wouldn't actively do something. So the Nodah B'yehuda says, so in that case, so we shouldn't believe him. Okay? So for this part, until I get to the next section, sort of, we're only going within the strict rule that it says over here. Okay? The lettuce case also is the same kind of a thing. Okay? The company lettuce is a drop deader. Maybe the company have to forge records to do this, and maybe that's considered that he's that should be a question mark there, I'm sorry. Maybe they have to forge letters or forge paperwork in order to do that. Maybe that's considered like he's active doing something. Okay.
What do you mean letters and paperwork?
Paperwork. Every time a batch comes in, they were marking off how many bugs we found. So they say 2 bugs in this batch, 4 bugs in this batch, 8 bugs in that batch.
That's like not really changing that much.
Write down the wrong number.
Right, they have to write down the wrong number.
According
that's not
right, so
not creating the...
To me, I wasn't clear if you should say that's something like you're actively doing something. Uman wouldn't go ahead and do something, actively to cheat. The Nodah B'yehuda says that's the only time we say that. Or you should just tell me the truth.
Recording of their cheat. No, it's not.
It's writing down in the record of the company meant to review that false information.
Right, it's a little...
No, it's not nothing. So that's a little bit. It's worse than just you come in and ask some question orally and you say something.
But okay, I'm not now. The next thing I have to tell you is like this. Okay, I told you. Look at this really great chart. It's a real David chart. Okay, look at this chart. Right, look at a David chart. Okay, and in this way of looking at it as I have 6 answers for you to explain when we say or not when we don't. Okay, and now, oh my gosh, we filled in some of them with green boxes and orange boxes. We filled with all kinds of things, and everybody agrees to all the kind of cases. And just about every single one of those people is not green all the way across. And it's just about every one of them bangs into a case where the Shulchan Aruch says a certain din, and he can't explain it, okay? Or he potentially can't explain it. So it's sort of, that itself tells us that maybe we don't have this exactly right, okay? And maybe we need to step back a little bit and think like this. The Magen Avraham told us what he thought was the rule when he said Umar Lemar Nafshi and Umar Lemar Nafshi. And then he asked himself, wait a second, the case of tzitzis doesn't fit. Okay, he says, the case of tzitzis doesn't fit. So he says, oh, well, tzitzis is an extra star. I have a new reason why you should believe me in the case of tzitzis. Okay, it makes you think that really what everybody's saying is not so specific. If you realize, everybody who I told you so far is all Achronim who are saying answers. Okay, the Rishonim don't say anything like this. You get the feeling that it's more like what the Beis Yosef said, that when there's Ikka, Lemikvid, Tvei Allah, the Milsa, when you're very makvid, that's when you believe the guy. When you're not very makvid, you don't believe the guy. And now everyone's giving their twist on exactly what does it mean to be very makvid or not very makvid. You don't believe him in every case, but you believe him in certain cases. So Lefi, the case that they were dealing with, they could say, in this case the rule is the following. In this case the rule is the following. That doesn't mean, some of them lehed you say, I don't hold to that person. The Nagdi says, I don't hold to what the Magen Avraham says. But I'm not convinced that any of them don't hold up the other ones. Okay, when you're to face another case, if the Chamsi would have talked about sugar that has maybe flour mixed into it, maybe he would have said a different explanation. Meaning, I'm taking it, the way the chart looks, it's so boxed in that I only say one answer. That's the only case you could believe the Uman. I'm not convinced about that. Okay, the Shulchan says, he says, in all these kind of Shulchan like us, Kufi Dalet, he says, in all these kind of cases, everything is Darazet Tolu Fi Ha'es. Okay? Whether you should believe the person, you shouldn't believe him, it depends on the kind of people they are. Okay? It depends on, so that means to say is, maybe life is not so formal and so rigid that each sheet only holds of their thing and that's it, but that it's a little broader and that we could sort of use our judgment a little bit, well, the way he was trying to say is, a little bit, we have to look and say, realistically, does this Uman is the kind of guy who's very careful? Is this a situation where you be extra careful or not? And these will then be just examples of cases where there's more svara or less svara to believe a person, but not that they're the give all end all. It's the end of the whole shayla to talk. Okay.
So you make the general hashar is just the Uman or any answer?
No, it's for Uman. It's a special rule for Uman. When a person who's a professional is more careful about what he speaks. And then we say that Uman wouldn't lie. So the quality control people in the company are very careful because of their reputation, etc., etc. Okay. Now, until now, the whole last time, and until now, even today, we talked about things in a very halachic manner. Okay? Do we apply the rule? Do we not apply the rule? Should we say Uman Lemar Nafshi? Should we not say Uman Lemar Nafshi? Okay, that's we were very by the books. But there's a whole group of practical considerations also. Okay, I'm going to focus on the case that's most to our hearts, which is the Pesach Medicine List. Okay? And talk about whether in practice we could say Uman Lemar Nafshi in those cases. Okay? And again, we're moving away from the strict halachic. Should I say it only if it's this? What if it's for Yidden? And only for Goyim? Those are very strict rules of when we shouldn't believe him. Now we're going to move to some more practical things. Okay? The not everything I'm going to say, but a lot of the things I'm going to say were brought up about 10 years ago. There was a big meeting of Rabbanim from different hashgachas. It was a very interesting meeting. The meeting had a table in the middle where the poskim for different hashgachas were sitting.
Here in Chicago?
No, it was in New York. And it had another table around that of experts from different hashgachas who were there to stick in their 2 cents as needed, people that they had questions. And the people on the inside table went through this long list of questions and things to consider about these medicine lists. The people on the outside were there just to listen. They were curious, but also to type in specific people who were there to be able to stick in what they knew things about medicines and ingredients and things like that. As needed, that's what they were there for.
And you were at the
meeting? I was at the meeting. Yeah. What? So it was. It was a little bit political because there were people who were insulted that they weren't on the inside table instead of the outside table, as you can imagine. But what we did was, Rabbi Heber and I were I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say referees, but we moderators, good word, moderators. So Rabbi Heber punked in the last minute. Something happened that he couldn't come, but we stood in the middle. between the two tables, and we went through the questions and helped try to keep us focused on the things. So if you like, you could tell me I was on the inside table, the outside table, wherever you'd rather put me. Okay? Anyhow, okay. So let's go like this. Okay, so I have a few things to consider. Okay, the first, like this. If we're going to believe people because there's uman, okay, which person qualifies as the uman? And there was a big difference of opinion about that question. Is when we say that the uman l'mar nafshe, does that mean is I have to go to the guy who sits at a desk that says quality control on top of his desk, and he's the lab technician, he's the guy who knows about ingredients and approves of them, this and that, he's the uman, he really is the uman? Or is it okay to get an answer from a consumer representative who answers questions from outsiders? They send them a letter and say, hi, can you tell me if this is chametz? And that person finds out the answers. Okay, and that person responds to you. Now, that person who responds to you, they of course know nothing. They don't know anything whether there's chametz or not in there. They have to turn back to the quality people in the company and say, can tell me is it chametz or is it not chametz? So, is that a case where the uman is putting his umness on the line? That's what Rabbi Heinman thought. He said, Lamaisa is when the company representative answers a question, then he's putting the company's reputation and the quality people's reputation, those people's reputation on the line. He's speaking as an uman. And others said, no, that person's not an uman. That's just guys that take $12 an hour to answer the phone. I mean, they don't have any umness. They just repeating the answer.
Could I say that?
Of course you could.
So there's a company that we certified. They changed their name often, Malencrop. It's a huge company. Really huge. You have to walk for blocks. They own it. The name of the street is Malencrop over there in St. Louis. And they deal with pharmaceuticals. And I went there one time, and I was dealing not with the secretary, but actually someone, I think it was quality control, and I got wrong information. I simply got wrong information.
I'm going to come to that. I'm going to come to that in a second, towards the end. Okay. So the first question was, which person is the uman? Okay, which person do I have to talk to say this person is uman, and we could say the uman l'mar nafshe? Okay. The second is the way when you go to a company. And we're going to use sorbitol as an example. Okay. You go to the company and it makes medicine and say this sorbitol in your medicine that you make. Tell me, is that sorbitol chametz? Okay. The medicine company doesn't make sorbitol. Okay. They don't make sorbitol. They buy sorbitol, okay? How do you make sorbitol? You take starch, okay, and you turn it into sugar, okay, glucose, okay, and then you turn the glucose into sorbitol, okay? So when you go to the medicine company and you say to them, tell me, is your sorbitol chametz? So they say, well, we have no idea if our sorbitol is chametz. So they go back to the manufacturer of the sorbitol and say, tell me, is your sorbitol chametz? Okay, so the manufacturer, the guy who made the sorbitol, he has no idea if it's chametz. He has to go back to the person who sold him the glucose and say to him, excuse me, sir, is your glucose chametz? Now that guy knows what was the starch or the starting material that he used to make the glucose in the first place. Okay, so that means the question that I asked to the company, to the medicine company, I asked him a question that went back from him back to a supplier, maybe with a distributor in the middle, to a supplier, back to the guy who made the glucose in the first place, and that guy has to now tell us what starch he used. So let's say the person at the medicine company is the uman. Okay, he's uman l'mar nafshe. He would never risk his reputation to tell me something if it wasn't the truth. But he asked other people who are very hidden. Okay, are those people umnim? Does he get that information all the way back? So now it's a judgment. If you say, come on, if he's an uman, he only asks umnim who asks umnim, that's sort of how the chain goes back. He doesn't just ask any shmedra, he doesn't go, hi, tell me, is your glucose chametz? He's asking someone who's an uman, that's like his peer who he speaks to. Okay, so that's a question, is whether all those people are necessarily umnim. Okay, that's a question. That's a question, whether those people are
multiple suppliers. And how do you know?
Okay. No.
He's not going to give a straight answer.
No. And that's my next point is, my next point is that even if all the people who ask are umnin, and they ask all the way chain all the way back that are umnin, okay, these things they're not steady. They don't stay the way that they are like this. Okay, in this case we have a bunch of chains over here. The medicine company bought sorbitol. Okay, who bought glucose, who bought starch. Okay, any of those things are subject to change. Okay, so even if today they told me the truth, even if today when on Tu B'Shvat we asked them and they asked all the people back and they gave me back an answer Tu B'Shvat, yes, everything is fine. Okay, but those things they're not committed to that. They're just, even if we say that they're telling us the truth, they're telling us the truth today. Not that's the truth tomorrow. If they switch suppliers, they get a new person who gives them any of these steps, gets something new along the way. then it won't work. Okay. Now, another thing is, related to the fact that it's such a chain, is it was once suggested to one of the people who's involved in this, and said to him like this: I'll tell you what you should do. You send a very generic letter that says to the company, please tell me if any of the things that you make are made with wheat, rye, spelt, oats, or barley, whatever, something a very generic type of letter. So somebody said to one of them, a Kashrus person said to them, he says, I'll tell you what, I want to give you, instead, let's look at the medicines, I'll look in the PDR, and I'll see in there what the ingredients are, and I will write you specific questions for your company, rather than just a generic letter that says, please tell me if any of the things that you have are made with wheat, with rye, spelt, something like that, some kind of a more broad question. I'll write specific questions to the company. And like an example like this, if your item has sorbitol in it, I'm going to say to you, please ask your sorbitol manufacturer if he could go back to the person who buys the glucose, who can tell him whether the starch that he uses in making this thing, whether that is starch is wheat, rye, spelt, oats, or barley. Okay, and now please go ask that person to tell you all the way back, because that's really the question they should be asking. And the response back from that person was, they'll never answer that question. If I answer that question, of course he's not going to answer. Okay, so to which this Kashrus person said to him, well, if you don't think they'd answer that question, then you're not getting the answers that you want to. Meaning, that's really the question we have to know: is what starch should they make the glucose out of?
Why didn't you answer that question?
It's too complicated. It's a way complicated question. Our medicine company have to go to the sorbitol guy and say, sorbitol guy, please ask your glucose, the guy who you get your glucose from, if he could tell us what the starch is made from. Okay, that's a very many steps away. Okay?
There's no relationship with the company. You can't force them to do
Right, we just ask them.
hard enough to get through the kosher.
Because this becomes relevant with, when it comes to allergens. So I could imagine that this is something that they would want to know.
So if it was relevant, if it was relevant to allergens, then they have their own mahala of how to deal with that. Okay, these things, if they're made from chametz, they would be an allergen concern. So companies are set up with that musag of we have to deal with making sure there's no allergens. Okay, if I made this would come back. I've told you this before. I've said this before. That I looked at a spec sheet for whiskey. Okay, the spec sheet was not written for the rabbis. Okay, there's 20 pages of specs about the whiskey, and some page buried along there wanted to know whether it was gluten-free. I said, yes, it's gluten-free. Okay, because it really is, even though it's made of barley. Okay, it was scotch. Okay, it's made from barley. The whole thing is pure chametz. But when you think of the perspective from a gluten perspective, there's no gluten carrying over here. Okay, so when you think of allergens are the proteins. So they say sorbitol has no protein in it. So what I'm saying, so in that
it's gluten-free or it's allergen-free?
No, it's gluten-free.
Meaning it's considered wheat allergen-free?
Allergen of wheat is gluten?
Yeah, the proteins. Yeah, the allergen is the protein should work. So what I'm saying is that if they have a setup to make these determinations, so when Mr. Sorbitol goes in, is your stuff gluten-free, then they're set up for that. That's set.
Even if that's the case, and if there's no allergen in it, then he might even say, oh yeah, it's gluten-free, because he thinks that the reason why you're asking.
That's true. He may be misunderstanding. Masking. Okay, that's true.
Is there any way possible to differentiate between the glucose? If I give you 100 different
Between what?
100 vials of glucose come from different starches. Is there any possible way to differentiate?
I don't know why that make a difference. I don't have access to it anyway. I'm not sure.
Does every medicine show inactive ingredients?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay. Now, another point is that we think of things based on our culture and what we're used to. So in the United States, Yochanan was just mentioning about allergens, and Lady mentioned it before, and companies are very sensitive to allergens and telling you truth about ingredients and this and that. And that's how we operate, because we're used to that style of how things are done. Okay? La Dafka does that translate into every company, like to small companies, and even kosher came to many places in the Far East, where a lot of these ingredients come from, where they don't have the same cultural sensitivity to these kind of things. So it's not as clear that they're as straightforward or as as we are about these kind of things. And we see it, or we know every so often comes up once in a while a story about people who are cheating. Okay, that happens once in a while, not such a big deal. But also look at companies with negative reviews about their products online, and they don't care. They just keep on going. It doesn't throw them about their stuff. Okay. Last thing is like this. Last thing on this, basically on this, like this. This is what Moshe was referring to. When we go to companies and we call them up. They want having an initial inspection. So I call them up today and I say to them, Bob, how you doing? Okay, I'm going to come down on Tuesday to see what's in your company. Please tell me all this kind of information. And they do, and they tell you a whole slew of information. Okay, and I'm coming on Tuesday. Okay, as soon as we finish Labor Day, I'm on my way over to your company to come see it over. And guess what happens when we come there? Okay, Lav Dafka is always the way they told it to us. Sometimes they're trying to trick us, but more often than not, they're not trying to trick us. They're just, I didn't think you cared about that thing. I didn't mean that. Or when you said this, what you said before, and when you said wheat, I thought you meant gluten, and that, so maybe you don't want to see. The guy was saying Lav Dafka, even that he's being malicious. Okay, but how often does it happen? We get the information from them, and then we come down. Oh, you cared about this. I didn't realize that. I didn't think so. And they know you're coming. Okay, 2 days in, you're going to be in the plant. Okay, so what I'm saying is that it makes you wonder about type of svaras, but just because we have experience. We sit there and we watch when these things happen, and we're going to come to the next day. We're about to show up. We know what's going to happen. So all these bunch of 5 or 6 things, I don't remember how many I said, just give pause to thinking about whether we should apply Ulamar Nafshi by the medicine and things like that, or at least say that if you want to do that, then you have to do it more intelligently. You have to do it more carefully and more thought out than just saying like that. Now, so just to switch a drop for a minute, we're not off of Ulamar Nafshi. The people who do this have 2 other cheshbonos going on. Okay? And that is, they say is, listen.
People who do what?
Who make a list. Say, you should know that almost everything that could be chametz or not chametz, I'm not talking about that has wheat in it. That's only, let's say, sorbitol. Almost everything that's made with those kind that could or could not be chametz, it's almost always not chametz. Okay, so the ikar din is probably you could assume that it's not chametz. See, so all I'm doing is a chomer b'alma. I'm just trying to be extra careful. So whatever I can do, that's what I can do. Okay, and the other variation of that is that most of these things are in not edible forms. Okay, they're in like pill forms. So it's just being extra cautious that I want to make sure that there's no chametz. So whatever I can find I can find out. But if I can't find out, so fine. So what I'm trying to do is uman amar nafshi. But if it doesn't work perfectly, okay, that's fine. That's all I have to do. I'm just giving I'm doing as much as I can. But I can is what I can do. Okay, and there's legitimacy to both of those points. Okay, both of those would say is really it's mutter anyhow. So you want to be extra careful and weed out a couple of pieces of chametz here and there. Okay, so whatever it's worth. So the company comes tell me this one's chametz, so that's one I won't use. But by and large, it was mutter anyhow. If they would have told me, I would have followed the ikar. Then it would have been mutter anyhow. Okay? And there's merit to that. Just that if that's really what's going on, then you have to think sometimes when you ask the question about something that's not one of those things. It is edible, it's a liquid or a powder, and it's not something that's so critical. And the people who were looking at your piece of paper, they wouldn't have taken that. They would have taken this thing for, let's say, for heartburn. They would say, okay, listen, on Pesach, I'm going to be extra mark, but I'm not willing to say, yeah, the ikra din is that it's roiv, it's mutter anyhow. I'm not ready for that. I'll suffer with a little heartburn. So my hair won't be as shiny as it was last year. Okay, so I'll live with that. I can handle that. I can handle that. A lot of people who they once you get into the mode of look at the list and you look at things that maybe don't meet these criteria. Okay, I'm saying falling back more seriously on Umar Nafshi, which we raise some questions about.